Big Mama. Hi, Kevin. Love the scooter. Didn't feel like doing the movie tonight, Kevin? Hey, whisper to me. I thought you were over in the movie. It did look kind of good. I think I'll watch that on Netflix myself, actually. The vegan one. Thanks for coming, guys. Our little reading corner. Kids. Hey, Davita. Jendo. Hi. Sherry Shirley. Just chat amongst yourself while I see what other stories I'm going to read, okay? I'll put a little bit of music on. Steph Burns. Never mind, I can't even get it on. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Hi, Annie Cuckoo. Yes, Kevin, what was it? I've been meaning to ask, but I didn't want to ask. What is it, Kevin? Hi, Steph. Good, Boo. I'm glad you're here. Oh, gosh, I'm scared to hear what your phone call is. I didn't say in the auction. I'm so sick. My friend, what? Oh, gosh, Kevin. Oh, Kevin. Oh, so sorry, Kevin. So sorry. 39 years old. Yeah, many prayers, Kevin. Yes, her mother needs those prayers. Oh, mm. Hi, Element W50. Kevin got that call during the auction today, a lot earlier today. I know you said you didn't want to say during the auction. I understand that. Oh, thank you, sweet pea. That's so wonderful. Her mother will needs that now. I'm gonna try to get this light where I'll be able to see a little better. I know I still have some stories that I had picked out last night. She just went to sleep, no reason. Okay, Kevin. We'll keep praying, Kevin. We're not going to stop. We have 22 here. Um, Hi, Mary. I always love seeing you come in. Oh, I love seeing everybody come in. Are you still here, Big Mama? My fan? I know, Mary. Get me back to 2K so I can go right back down again. It's fun, you know? Up and down, up and down. Oh, good, Mary. I'm wondering if Big Mama took off already. She always gets me in trouble. She's always here. Yes, she is. Um, I told Moo about this earlier. Oh, right, Kevin. But, you got to get it out. Even though this is YouTube and everything, and there's a lot of crazy people on here. There are a few of us that are pretty tight. We know that we're real. Oh, Captain Lee, your baby, your beautiful little dog. 17 years old. Wow, you gave her a wonderful life. You and your husband, didn't you? Gave her a wonderful life. Peanut will be 17 in December, Captain Lee, if she makes it that long. Little Minnie will be 14 in May. Tinkerbell would have been 14 in May. She just passed. My little bruiser. I wish he was here. Gosh, I loved that dog. Loved him so freaking much. I know how you're feeling, Captain Lee. I do. Why is it so dark over there? Look, I put up new curtains today, guys. I even cleaned the window. Can you believe it? I think they're kind of cute. Can't really see them in this light, but I know Kevin's wonderful. 17 and a half. Wow. I hope we do too, Captain Lee. I was going to tell you guys something. She'll never know that I'm telling, so. But you guys know, my niece Tiffany, the one Lou already knows, and Danielle, because we were messaging earlier. Right, Captain Lee. My niece Tiffany, the one that has the 8 kids. Well, she and her husband have always had like up and down relationship. Thank you. I see you. You see me. Remember, though, I was just showing you guys in chat the kids' pictures and everything just like 2 weeks ago. Remember? Or no, you guys don't remember. Maybe, I know a bunch of you were there. I was showing Carolyn, and she was asking me all about the kids and baby Dream, remember? Maybe the chat's just moving slow. Or stuck. You remember, Davita? Okay. Remember, Sherry? Well, Shelly, my sister Shelly, texts me this morning, probably about noon. And I'm not going to say it exactly the way she said. Well, she goes, she goes, you hear? Hear, did you hear? And I'm like, no. And right away, I'm panicking. Yeah, panicking me so bad. And I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. The heart going like this. I'm waiting. Please, I don't want to hear anything. And I won't tell you how she told me. First, let me tell you, Tiffany is okay. All right. But she tells me the way she says it. Did you hear? No, I didn't. What? And she says, Tiffany was stabbed by Lamar 30 times last night. And I was just, oh my God, what? Because she was leaving him, they've been having problems off and on over the years. And yeah, it's true. It is true. But then the surgeon said that if the knife had been bigger, she'd be dead. Mm-hmm. When she first told me that, I'm picturing her on life support, in ICU and everything. I hate how she told me that way. I mean, that just had me in such a weird mood all freaking day. Yes, Big Mama, 30 times. I have pictures. But the knife, Tiffany didn't know. I can read you exactly. Exactly. And Tiffany's 39. She'll be 40 June 1st. Okay. She's stitched up. She's got big cuts here on her arms. There's all these stitches. Oh, God. Now I'm noticing she's got her arm raised up. All these cuts under there. The poor kid has blood stains, and she's got one right here. She's holding her shirt. Look at the blankets right there. I'm not going to show Tiffany, though. Can you see the blankets? Yeah, she has that new baby, little Dream. Yeah, because she. Can you see? Yeah, little Dream. She was leaving him. Hi, cross-eyed Betty. He's on the run. He took her money, took her car. I'll tell you what. And Tiffany's in a homeless shelter. She's out of the hospital. Yeah, she goes, you hear, question mark. Lamar stabbed Tiff 30 times last night. And I said, what? And then I go, what? What? And I'm going, no, no. And then she says, that is after she is stitched up. She sent a bunch of pictures. Surgeon said if it was a different knife, she would have been dead. She is now in a homeless shelter. He stole her car and her money. I said, oh my God, thank God she is alive. I thought she was dying. I about had a heart attack. She goes, I know. I about died when she called me this morning. She goes, so they will be coming sooner than expected. They're coming down to my dad's. I said, where is he? He better be in jail. And she said, he is on the run. Police can't find him. I said, is he on drugs? She said, no. I said, what kind of knife? And she said, he has been physically abusive on and off for years. He didn't want a separation. I don't know what type of knife. And I said, he's crazy. And she said she was naked. She had just gotten home from work. She was changing, and he came in, and she thought he was punching her. She said she kept saying, I'm sorry, please stop. And when he stood up, he was covered in blood, and she then realized he was stabbing her. And she said, thank God she's alive. She goes, I know, I can't imagine someone willing to do something like that. Like make your kids parentless as well. Isn't that crazy though, guys? And he's an older guy. He's no young guy. Right? I'm so happy you're here, cross-eyed Betty. I know. I feel horrible for her, but I'm so happy she is alive. Thank God. Can't believe he would do something like that. Okay, let's see. This one's called Roses. I know, Davita. I'm probably going to put this on private when it's over. Yeah, 8 kids. All see, DeAndre, what did we decide? He was 21, and then all the way down to what? Little Dream was just born, wasn't it December? So 21 down to a, you might as well say a newborn almost. She's a little older, a few months old. But he's always been the one that stayed home and took care of the kids. Yeah, I'm going to, Kevin. I'm going to make it private. Okay, Roses, St. Augustine, Florida. In the end, what enraged him more than the love affair itself was the way they assumed he had the intelligence of a wooden post. Did they think he wouldn't notice the way his wife lit up whenever his first officer entered the room, or the way the first officer followed her with his eyes? Obviously, they thought he was too stupid to realize how they both just happened to disappear at the same time, and that when they reappeared, she was glowing. Hi, Heart Made Wise. And his uniform smelled of rose perfume. It was infuriating. His father had warned him against taking such a flirtatious, pretty woman to wife. She would stray, he had said, and devil curse him. His father had been right, and his men were laughing at him behind his back. They knew what was going on. Oh, yes, they did. Yeah, I'm going to. He was a laughing stock because of his wife and his first officer, and it was going to stop tonight. He would make sure of it. When his wife swept into his commandant's quarters in the Castillo, he was seated at his desk, apparently absorbed in paperwork. She had been pouting for days, ever since he'd sent his first officer south to the Caribbean with an important commission that would keep him away from the Castillo for more than 2 years. She flounced into a chair and glared at him in petty anger. Well, she said peevishly when he refused to look up. He glanced at the door and nodded to the night guard who stood there. The man tactfully withdrew from the room, closing the heavy door behind him. He leaned back in his chair, his nostrils twitching as the cloying scent of her rose perfume filled the room. Well, my dear, it seems we are at an impasse, he said. I am happy working in this new world, but you are not happy living here. Or should I say you're not happy living here with me? His wife looked up sharply, going a little pale at the tone of his voice. She searched his eyes, trying to see what, if anything, he knew about her and her lover. What nonsense have you got in your head? She asked, trying to sound playful and failing. I'm perfectly happy here with you. You haven't seemed you have not seemed so these last few months, said the commandant. He rose from his seat and beckoned to his wife. However, perhaps the surprise I have for you will mend matters. Come walk with me. A surprise for me? Asked his wife, half delighted and half suspicious. She rose with a dubious smile on her red lips, and he bowed her through the door into the outer chamber where the night guard stood to attention. As the commandant took his wife's arm, he said loudly, There is a ship in the harbor that leaves for Spain at first light, my dear. I am sure the captain would be happy to oblige us when we explained the situation to him." His wife gave him a puzzled glance at this sudden change of topic, but it was not for her to benefit that he broached it. He saw the guard start a little and then school his face to impassivity, impassivity as they swept out into the courtyard arm in arm. The commandant smiled grimly. The night guard would certainly pass along what he'd heard to the other men, fueling the speculation about the commandant and his unfaithful wife. "What was all that about a ship?" his wife demanded petulantly as they crossed the courtyard. "It's all part of the surprise," he told her soothingly as he led her to an unused storeroom and escorted her inside. "Why are we here?" his wife demanded sharply, staring at the broken pieces of furniture and dusty wooden crates that filled the room. "This is no place to hide a gift. On the contrary, my dear," he said happily, "it's the perfect place to hide something." So saying, he led her to a concealed opening in the wall. His wife stared at it. "What is that?" she asked suspiciously. "Why have I never seen it before?" "It's a hidden room I discovered some time ago," he said. "It's a place to store secret things." He lifted the torch from its socket beside the storeroom door and went to the dark opening. With a smile, he gestured for his wife to precede him into the secret room. The scent of her rose perfume filled the air as she stepped inside to see her surprise. At dawn the next morning, the commandant stood on the pier, waving goodbye to the ship bound for Spain. When the ship disappeared over the horizon, he strolled thoughtfully back to the Castillo and explained to his men that his wife had left for Spain to tend her ailing father. The soldiers exchanged looks, but none of them said anything in front of him. "Good night, Captain Lee." "Yeah, try to go to sleep." However, he knew that among themselves they would spread a different tale, one that claimed the commandant had discovered his wife's affair with the first officer and had separated the lovers, sending the officer to the Caribbean and banishing her to Spain for her infidelity. He didn't care what the gossips said. What mattered was that his unfaithful wife and her lover were gone, and he was a free man. A few months later, he resigned his position and left the Castillo for good. He left behind only vague rumors about his wife's scandalous love affair that had gone awry. 50 years swiftly passed away, and the story of his unfaithful wife had faded from the memory of the townspeople. Florida was now part of the United States, and the Castillo had become Fort Marion. New faces and new concerns filled the stone rooms and towers, and one of those faces belonged to Sergeant Tuttle. On this particular day, his main concern was moving some old cannons around the upper gun deck, not an easy task at the best of times. "Heave," he told his men. "Heave," they answered, doing so. Crash went the cannon right through the floor. "Holy Moses," shouted Tuttle, staring down into the huge hole that had opened in the floor of the gun deck. He could barely make out the cannon at the bottom amidst the dust, debris, and filtered sunlight. "What a god-awful mess you men got down there right now. You men get down there right now," he added, pointing to the two men closest to the stairs. The men hurried down the stairs and into the room below the gun deck, only to find it devoid of debris. There was no mess, no cannon, no dust. Nothing was amiss. The men stared wide-eyed at each other and then checked the adjoining rooms. Still nothing. Where was the dang blasted cannon? The two men ran back up to the gun deck to inform Tuttle of the disappearing cannon. The sergeant, still staring down at the hole, commented that it was taking his men far too long to appear. He jumped a mile when one of them spoke at his elbow. "Sarge, we can't find the cannon," the man reported. Tuttle jerked upright and whirled around. "What do you mean that you can't find the cannon?" he roared. "It's right there." He gestured into the hole. "It might be right there," said the man, quaking but defiant, "but it isn't down there." He gestured to the room below. The two men dragged Tuttle downstairs and showed him the empty room. By this time, most of the men working on the gun deck had followed them downstairs, so there was quite a crowd when the sergeant pronounced, "There must be a sealed chamber behind that wall. Men, we need pickaxes and sledgehammers." Immediately, the soldiers dispersed to locate the requested tools, and soon several men were hammering away at the coquina wall with a will, speculating between blows about the reason the newly christened cannon room had been sealed. As the first hammer penetrated the secret room, the air was suddenly filled with an overwhelming scent of roses. A moment later, the hole was big enough to peer inside. The men ripped away at the hole until there was room to enter the hidden chamber. Grabbing a lantern, Tuttle stepped into the secret space, followed by his men. There, amid the dust and rubble, stood the fallen cannon, and behind it, chained to the wall, were two moldering skeletons. One still wore the decaying remains of a first officer's uniform. The other still smelled faintly of roses. I think we kind of knew what was going to happen there. Yeah, did your cat come tonight? Yes, she usually leaves between 5 and 7. That's cool. Okay, we read this one. We read this one. Watermelon Thief, True Love, The Hermit. This one is about an alligator. I don't feel like reading about that right now. Yeah, and then Pink, the husband and wife with their melons. Remember the garden for cantaloupe? And he had that huge. Or wait, no, watermelon thing was never mind. Let's see. Hey, Moo. Is it really, Moo? How cool. That is neat. That's right by you. Oh, we read The Choking Doberman, remember? Okay, I guess we'll read The Witch's Curse, Fort Lauderdale. Once, long ago, when the area that is now the city of Fort Lauderdale was just a small settlement, there lived a couple with 11 sons. 11. The father was a poor farming man, so all those strapping boys came in right handy, helping him till the soil and make a profit. But the couple desperately wanted a little girl to balance things out a mite. Someone to help her mama in the house, to climb trees and run races with her brothers, and to sit on her papa's knee when he told stories at night time. Even the boys thought a little sister would be a nice addition to their happy family. So they all started praying and praying and praying for the good Lord to send them a little girl. Nothing happened. Wow, Kevin, that's crazy. Now, Madeline, the boy's mama, was good friends with a local plantation owner's wife, and they often got together to drink tea at the lovely manor house where the rich woman lived. One afternoon, as they sat sewing on a quilt and sipping tea together, Madeline confided her dream to the plantation owner's wife. "I wish you had come to me sooner," her friend said earnestly, snipping off a spare thread with a small pair of scissors. "I would have sent you right down to old Granny Tucker's house in the village. She's a witch woman, and I'm sure she could help you." Madeline pondered this as she carefully quilted a fern pattern onto the pink square in front of her. "I'm not sure my husband would like consulting a witch woman," she said at last. "It rather smacks of black magic, and he's high church. Hey, Brian Clan. Boo. My boo. Do you need to tell your husband?" asked her friend. Madeline nodded her head emphatically. "We tell each other everything," she said. "It's simpler that way." "I didn't call you a witch." "Well," said the rich lady, "I recommend Granny Tucker, even if it's a little girl you're after." Not even. Why did I throw even in there? "I recommend Granny Tucker if it's a little girl you're after." Madeline thanked her friend and thought the matter through on the way home. She was uneasy consulting a witch, even a good one, but she longed to have a little girl. She had almost decided against the idea when the neighbor's daughter came skipping down the lane toward her, blonde ringlets glowing in the dappled sunlight coming through the leaves of the palm trees overhead. Madeline's heart caught in her throat, and tears sprang to her eyes. Oh, to have a little girl like that! She smiled at the child through her tears, and then and there decided to speak to her husband about Granny Tucker. 1 minute, guys. 1 second, I'm right here. Just gonna take care of my nose for a minute. Thank you, sweet pea. I hate it when you can't tell. You know, I hope it's all right. Well, the farmer hemmed and hawed all night when she brought up the witch. I've heard she practices white magic during the day, but after dark, it's all cursing and hexes and other nasty practices. I think this might be our last chance, Madeline said quickly. I'm getting too old for childbearing. Her husband flashed her a worried glance. He'd been thinking along those lines himself, but he hadn't wanted to say anything to his beloved wife. In Madeline's face, he read hope and longing and sweet resignation. She was going to leave the matter up to him. This was against everything his religion said was right, but he could not deny his helpmate this one last hope. So the farmer consented. Is he crazy? 11 sons, and they're going to have a 12th kid? The next day, after the work was done and the boys were in bed, the farmer and his wife slipped down to the village and knocked on Granny Tucker's door. The witch woman opened the door immediately. For a moment, she stood framed against the bright firelight, a stooped silhouette of utter darkness. Madeline drew in a sharp breath, her heart thudding in sudden apprehension. Then the moment passed. Her eyes adjusted to the glare, and in the firelight, she beheld a wrinkled old woman with crinkly white hair and a lined face. Her eyes were dark and sharp, and she leaned on a cane. Winding around the cane were shallowly incised symbols that seemed to writhe with their own energy. The handle of the cane was a snarling tiger's head. It was a thing of absolute evil. Madeline knew instinctively, and she looked away from it at once, her thumbs pricking as all the tiny hairs on her arms stood on end. She wanted to run away, but she thought of the golden-haired neighbor girl, and so she stayed. Her husband urged her inside with a hand under her elbow, and she passed the witch woman in the doorway, being careful not to touch her. Old Granny Tucker chuckled as they went to stand before the fire, holding hands like a pair of nervous children. I see you coming, farmer man, you and your wife there. You want something from old Granny. A potion, perhaps? There's a little girl in your fine lady's eyes that wants to be born, but can't without some help. I'm going to get another drink. Just my allergies. As she spoke, the witch twisted her cane back and forth in her gnarled old hands. Her nails were long and filed to a point like claws. Madeline shuddered to see them. We will pay you for the potion, her husband said bravely. Whatever you want. It isn't paying I want, not in money, said Granny Tucker. Madeline's stomach lurched and all the muscles in her back spasmed painfully, as if in warning. What is it you want? She asked in a clear, high voice, quite unlike her usual tone. I want your little girl, Granny Tucker said, with a malicious smile. The day she turns 10, I want her to come live with me and learn to conjure. I couldn't, Madeline protested. The very thought made her ill. No deal, no daughter, said the witch woman. Would you like to see her? The little girl stuck in your eyes? Her husband shook his head. No, ma'am, we won't take up more of your time, he said. But Madeline was struck by a longing so deep it bowed her in half. Bowed her in half. It bowed her in half, I guess. Hugging herself tightly as if in pain, she whispered, Yes. Instantly, Granny Tucker waved her snarling tiger cane in the air in front of them, and a white mist formed into a circle before their eyes. Inside the circle, appeared the head and shoulders of a little girl with the farmer's eyes, and Madeline's oval face and enchanting smile. Her hair was black as midnight, her lips ruby red. Her skin was pale, but her cheeks were rosy, and her eyes sparkled with laughter. My baby, Madeline gasped, feeling as if her heart would tear in two at the sight. My baby. Tears poured down her cheeks, and she felt her husband slip his arms around her. All right, he said for both of them, his voice husky with feeling. We agree to your terms. Where is this potion of yours? Old Granny Tucker cackled in triumph and gestured to the rickety wood table in the center of the room. A thick brown bottle about 6 inches high materialized in the center. It was full of a dark liquid that filled the small room with a pungent smell. Drink it, she told Madeline, and remember your promise. The smell nauseated her, and she knew she would have to drink the whole thing at once, or she wouldn't drink it at all. Bravely, she grabbed the small bottle, tipped it up, and drank it down in one gulp. It tasted even worse than it smelled. She had to clap a hand over her mouth to keep from retching it up. Feeling queasy, she looked over at the witch, who was still standing near the door. Is that all? That's all, said Granny Tucker. She waved her cane at the door, which swung open of its own accord. Knowing they were dismissed, the farmer and his wife crept away, Madeline very pale and queasy from the potion she'd taken. Yeah. And she remained pale and queasy every day for the next 10 months. For the potion had done its job, and she conceived within a month after swallowing it down. The boys were delighted by the news and set to work with a will, building an addition onto the side of their house and knitting and kitting it out as a nursery. Everyone knew the baby would be a girl, even though Madeline and her husband had never mentioned their trip to Granny Tucker's house. Sylvia was born just before Christmas, and she was a perfect baby right from the start. She slept through the night by the end of the first month and whimpered politely when she was hungry or needed changing. She cooed in delight when she saw her brothers and cuddled up against her papa when he took her on his knee. She learned to sing as soon as she learned to talk, and she followed her mama all over, trying to help with the housework and care for the chickens and milk the cows. Her hair was black as midnight and curled in lovely ringlets down her back. Her white skin never freckled. Neither did it tan in the sun, though she often forgot to wear her sunbonnet. Sylvia was quick and smart, beautiful and funny. Everyone loved her. Her parents, her brothers, neighbors, and people at church. The plantation owner's wife became her godmother and was as proud of Sylvia as if she were her own. After all, she was the one who'd advised her parents to go to Granny Tucker. Madeline and her husband avoided the old witch woman whenever they could. The sight of her reminded them of the promises they would rather forget. Madeline was hoping the old woman would forget, or perhaps she would pass before Sylvia turned 10. That last thought shamed her. It was terrible to wish for another's demise. She wouldn't do it, not even for her beloved child. So Madeline forced all thoughts of the promise to the witch woman from her head, forced all the thoughts of the promise to the witch woman from her head, and enjoyed the first 9 years of Sylvia's young life with all the passionate love of a mother's heart. She made lovely dresses for her, gathered flowers with her, taught her to sew and quilt and embroider. She watched, laughing as the boys taught her to play ball and climb trees and ride horses. She loved watching Sylvia racing around the paddock on top of a tall horse, her long black ringlets sailing out behind her. My baby, she thought, my baby. As Sylvia's 10th birthday approached, Madeline grew pale and sickly. Old Granny Tucker was still stumping around the village, and she cackled triumphantly whenever she caught sight of Sylvia. Madeline knew the witch would come for her daughter. And what would she do then? Losing Sylvia would be like losing a limb. She would never get over the pain of it. I forgot to plug my phone in. Just a second. Okay. Her husband, too, was quiet and thoughtful. They carefully avoided talking of the matter, as if by not speaking of it they could make it go away. But neither of them were surprised when, a few minutes after dinner on Sylvia's 10th birthday, the door of their farmhouse blew open with a crash, and Granny Tucker walked in, brandishing her snarling tiger cane. "I've come for the girl," she called. "Pack her things." Sylvia gasped and shrank back in her chair. All 11 of her brothers, even the ones who were grown and married, were there to celebrate her birthday, and they leapt up as one and formed a protective line between Sylvia and the witch. "No," the farmer thundered from his place at the head of the table. "You will not take my child." "Yes, I will," Granny Tucker shot back. "Remember your promise." Madeline did remember their promise, and the way Granny Tucker had manipulated her longing to force the promise out of them. That wasn't right, not right at all. Madeline stood tall and interposed herself between the witch and her children. All of them were precious to her, from her oldest son, more than a head taller than she, and able to lift a wagon all on his own, to her little daughter. The witch could not have them. "You can have none of my children," Madeline said, thrusting out her chin defiantly. "Not one. You get out of here before I call the farm dogs." Old Granny Tucker's eyes flashed in a fury. She raised her evil cane and gestured toward the windows. The glass shattered in them, one after the other, sending shards all over the room. Two of the boys grabbed their little sister and hustled her upstairs, while everyone else ducked under the table to avoid the flying glass. A foul-smelling wind poured through the jagged remains of the windows, making the farmer and his family gag. I guess she's serious about this. The witch threw back her head and laughed maniacally, waving her cane and shouting ancient words that burned the backs of their eyes and made their skin feel as though black sludge were pouring all over their bodies. From upstairs, Sylvia screamed and writhed in agony. "No," shouted Madeline, "no." At her words, her eldest son and his brothers staggered forward against the terrible force of the wind and tackled the old witch, sending her sprawling backward through the door and down the steps to the ground. The wind ceased when she hit the dirt and Sylvia stopped screaming in pain. Shocked, the witch stared up at the huge farm boys standing over her, their arms crossed, faces grim and menacing. Glaring back, she tried to rise. Mean witch. Immediately, Madeline's eldest son picked her up as if she were a sack of potatoes, flung her over his shoulder, and marched her toward the garden gate. The witch beat him on the back of his legs with her cane. He ignored the blows and stepped out into the road. 9 of his brothers followed along behind in three rows of 3. The other boy remained behind to guard their parents and Sylvia. "Where are you taking me?" shrieked the witch. "I'm just seeing you home, ma'am," said Madeline's eldest, "to make sure nothing happens to you along the way." Old Granny Tucker let out a shriek of absolute rage. "You won't get away with this," she shouted. in her piercing treble. "The girl will die. I'll make sure of that. She will die from my horse's hoof before the year is out." Sure is, Brian. No one answered her. The boys just marched grimly onward in their lines of three, following their elder brother as he escorted the witch home. But Madeline, standing on the front porch with her husband's arms around her, shuddered in terror. Could it be true? Could the witch curse her baby so that she died? New Year's Day was only a few days away. The flying monkeys. We'll keep her away from the stables until after New Year's, her husband said, reading her thoughts. It's only a couple of weeks. The curse won't have any power after midnight on New Year's Day. Madeline nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Please, God, let it be so. Sylvia was shocked and subdued after the terrible birthday meal. For a day or two, she was glad to remain in the house under the watchful eye of her mother and those of her brothers who still lived at home. But after Christmas, she grew restless. She was used to the freedom of outdoors. She wanted to help with the animals, play games with her brothers, visit with the neighbors. She begged and pleaded so winsomely that her parents finally relented on New Year's Eve and let her go visit her godmother under the supervision of two of her brothers, who promised to keep her far away from horses. Madeline was frying potatoes on the kitchen stove when her second youngest child came running into the room in a panic. Oh, here is the illustration. That's all right, Brian Glant. I hate because this is backwards, mirrored, I guess. I can never get the picture right. See the little girl up there in that wall? That section there? "Mama, come quickly," he cried, almost in tears. Sylvia tripped and fell in the driveway of the manor house. She hit her head on a stone and is hurt real bad. Madeline gasped through the frying pan, potatoes and all, into the stone hearth where it would cause no harm, and ran out the door behind her son. This couldn't be the curse. It couldn't be. Sylvia had tripped and fallen in the driveway. She hadn't been kicked by a horse. She couldn't die. Please, God, let it be so. How did she trip? She gasped as she came parallel to her running son. "Oh, Mama," he gasped, tears streaming down his face. "Remember how it was raining last week and then it got all hot and dry? Well, the horses left deep hoof marks in the mud in the drive, and when it got hot, the prints dried up all hard and solid. Sylvia tripped on one of the hoof marks, and that's why she fell." A terrible pain shot through Madeline's heart. She staggered and almost fell. Her son cried out in alarm and caught hold of her, easing her to the ground. Madeline twisted away from him and vomited on the side of the road. It was her worst nightmare come true. Sylvia had been caught by the hoof of a horse. So she couldn't, wait, no, by the hoof of a, yeah. And she had been caught by the hoof of a horse and she was dying. Madeline could feel her dying somewhere in the back of her soul, where she held all her children close to her. "Mama, Mama, are you all right?" gasped her son. "Please be all right." He sounded like a little boy again, and his fear pierced the shadows gathering inside her head. She sat up and wiped her mouth. "I'm all right," she whispered. "Help me up." Oh, wait, no, I thought that was, never mind. I thought that was Sylvia. "I'm all right," she whispered. "Help me up." Let's get to your sister. They were met at the edge of the driveway by the plantation master himself, who lifted Madeline into the saddle and rode up the mile-long driveway like the wind. They had carried Sylvia indoors, and the pale little girl lay on a yellow silk couch, and I did not take Ambien, I promise. Her dark curls spread over a matching pillow. She was barely breathing. Madeline fell to her knees beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face. We sent for the doctor, wept her grandmother, but I think she broke her neck. Oh, Madeline, I'm so sorry. At that moment, little Sylvia opened her lovely eyes and looked up at her mother. She tried to speak, but the words died in her throat before she could utter them. She took a breath, and tiny bubbles formed at the side of her mouth. Her little face wrinkled in distress at her inability to speak. Finally, she managed to form a word with her lips. Mama. And then she died. The witch's curse had come true. I hate when these stories end this way. Oh, I know too. Heart made wise. I feel so bad for Kevin, for his friend, especially. This one is called Initiation from Miami. I don't think I read this one. I boarded the bus in Miami, resigned to a long and boring crosstown trip. The bus was a local, and my stop practically the last one. I stared moodily out at the rainy city around me as a middle-aged man with a haggard face and a worn-out business suit plopped into the seat beside me and shoved a briefcase underneath it. Are you a student? He asked as the bus lurched into heavy rush hour traffic. Yes, I said shortly, not wanting to talk. I had a lot on my mind. My girlfriend had broken up with me over lunch this afternoon, and I wanted to brood about it. I was in college once, a long time ago now, the man mused, leaning back against the seat and staring around at the crowd in the bus. It was a varied lot, from a mother of three to men in business attire to teenagers absorbed in their cell phones. Used to belong to a fraternity. Do you belong to a fraternity? He asked, voice and eyes suddenly sharp. The intensity with which he asked the question made me nervous. No, sir, I said. I don't have time. I'm pre-med and have lots of studying to do to get into grad school. Good, said the stranger, relaxing again. Never join a fraternity, son. They're no good. My fraternity had a brutal initiation rite. They'd take candidates out to a ruin of a house outside town, and that they said was haunted. They'd tie the fellows up and leave them there all night with the ghost. Nasty. If you believe in ghosts, I said dryly. I didn't. I'm a man of science, and I believe what science can prove. That went for religion as well as ghost. Still, if I had been a praying man, I would have started right about then. This fellow with his intense manner and two bright eyes was making me nervous. Me, I made it through initiation all right, but a bloke who joined the next year didn't fare so well. All the creaking and moaning in that house, hour after hour, well, it turned his brain. About 2 a.m, he started screaming. He ripped out of the ropes tying him down as if they were made of spaghetti, and turned on the two fellows who were tied up with him. He killed them both with the Swiss Army knife he kept in his pocket. Then he hung himself. It was a bloody mess, and I mean that literally, son. He looked at me with his two bright eyes, and I squirmed a bit, wondering if I should make an excuse and get off at the next stop. This guy was creeping me out. Happened on the 3rd of December. I remember the date well, the stranger continued, turning his attention across the aisle to a pretty teenage girl who was rapidly texting on her phone. Nobody in the fraternity could forget it, but it didn't end with the haunted house. I'd be like, Mister, can you shut up? You know, I'd be like moving to a different part of the bus. Nope, nobody. Didn't end there. No, indeed. On December 3rd, the next year, one of the fraternity fellows who was responsible for the initiation of the crazy boy went crazy himself and shot his wife. It made the news. The next year, another one of that group flipped out and tried to run down his friends with his car. This also happened on December 3rd. That's terrible, I said, edging my body closer to the window. I was definitely getting off at the next stop and wished the bus driver would hurry up and get us there. A year passed without incident, the man went on, turning his bright gaze away from the girl to study the mother and her three children. Eight out of eight out of the 10 or so boys who participated in the fatal initiation all graduated from college that year. Then one of them popped up on the news when he killed himself and his family on December 3rd. Hurry up, bus driver, I thought, pushing my foot against the floor as if it were the accelerator. Hurry up. The next year, another former frat brother went crazy and drove his car off a bridge, the stranger continued, fiddling restlessly with the buttons on his worn gray business suit, his two bright eyes resting on a red-headed man speaking animately into a cell phone. And the following year, one of the graduated frat brothers who joined the army tried to shoot up the men serving in his platoon. Both events happened on December 3rd. Not good, I said at random, barely registering what I said. I was so jittery. Next year, it was arson, then murder again. Then it was suicide. I'd be like, okay, mister. And last year, a former frat brother bombed a building in Chicago. All the tragedies happened on December 3rd, the same day the initiate went crazy all those years ago. It was like some kind of curse was killing off the men responsible for his death, the stranger said. There's only one man left of that group now. Only one. Here's the illustration. We were approaching the next bus stop, and not a minute too soon in my mind. As the bus slowed, a woman leaned forward from the seat behind us and said, "Excuse me, sir," to the stranger riding beside me. "Do you happen to know the date?" She waved her checkbook at him in silent explanation for the question. "Why, yes, ma'am, I do," he said, as I grabbed my backpack from underneath my seat and prepared to rise. It's December 3rd. He smiled as he said it. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a gun. Oh, boy. They don't tell us who we did it to. Must have done it to him, though, right? That was kind of creepy. Yeah. We're all riding the bus. Oh, gosh. Well, I guess that'll be it for tonight. And a long day. Was creepy, huh? Right? Thank you guys for coming. Kevin, many prayers for you and for your friend, her family. One more sweet pea? Okay. And Captain Lee, for you and your little doggy, your sweet little one. Gave you a lot of happy years, just like you gave your doggy a lot of happy years, right? Wheels on the bus go round. Okay, one more. One more. Let's see. We go to spooky Michigan. Yeah, I did have a nap, Kevin, but I thought you guys were tired too. I don't want to keep you. Of course, you'll go to sleep, right? Okay, let's see what I can find. Yeah, I'm in no hurry. I just, I feel like people get bored. Maybe they don't want to say anything and they want to be polite. Let me find something that we haven't read or that doesn't look boring. Yeah, we read about Tom Quick. Yeah, the Phantom Trespasser. Uh, Ghost Train. Yeah, Ghost Train. I'm pretty sure we read that. Just lay and relax. I'll find something. Okay. All right, I see you. Oh, Kathy. Yeah. Okay, Element. Aw, Kitty's sleeping. Yeah, the train. Ghost Train. Let's see. I don't think I did read Ghost Train. I think that was something different. Ghost Train to Quamanon, Tacamanon. I don't know how you pronounce it. Somewhere in Michigan, a Falls State Park, Tacamanon. Well, old Con Culhane was just about the roughest, toughest lumber boss in the North Woods. He'd lick a man before he'd hire him, and any man who could stand up to him was guaranteed a job and a good salary to boot. One fellow I heard about licked the boss fair and square, and Con hired him on as a straw boss, which is what we lumberjacks call a worker who acts as a boss or crew leader in addition to performing regular duties. Con was lumbering the white pine in the regions around Sheldrake in those days, and I was one of his straw bosses. We kept the men in line and the lumber moving. There were only a few men and one woman whom Con really respected, and I was one of them. The woman was his wife, Ellen, who kept the books and made sure the business ran at a profit. Ellen was the power behind the big, blustering Irishman. Well, as we logged further and further away from Lake Superior, we began finding it difficult to move lumber down to the rivers. It wasn't so bad in midwinter when we could use sleds for the relatively short run to the riverside banking grounds. But when the spring but come the spring thaw, things weren't so easy. Now Con had been closely monitoring the development of the logging railroads to the south. Logging railroads were introduced in the 1850s. Small engines and portable narrow gauge truck made it possible for lumberjacks to log further away from the rivers. The railroads could haul loads of logs no matter what the weather, and in some cases, the river drive itself could be avoided entirely by carrying the logs straight to a mainland railroad depot. When Con spoke with Ellen about the possibility of starting his own lumber railroad, she was eloquent in her praise. According to his wife, the logging railroad was sufficiently economical to allow cutting in areas that had been considered too far from the nearest driving stream to make sledding practical. Furthermore, railroad tracks could be picked up and relayed through the forest, making them an even better investment. So Con got his logging railroad. The restless lumberman took a fierce delight in driving the trains, building spurs and short lines, and hauling lumber. Con was tireless in his expansion efforts. One winter, he moved his logging equipment and railroad south from the Little Two-Hearted River to the Taconiman River. Okay, Sweet Pea Valley by laying tracks in front of him as he drove across frozen swamps, then picking them up from behind as he went. Con built a railroad bridge right across the Twagamon River, using not much more than his bare hands and the back-breaking labor of his men. Then he put a chute into the mouth of the falls so his logs could ride smoothly to the bottom, rather than smashing into the rocky pool at the base of the cliff. No task was too big for Con Culhane. He even dammed the Two-Hearted River so he could use it to drive logs to Lake Superior. Pretty soon, Con could afford to run 2 locomotives to move the lumber, but his pride and joy was the first train Ellen had bought for her man. Indeed, the logging went so swiftly and penetrated so deeply into the Upper Peninsula that several competing companies packed up and moved to Wisconsin or Minnesota. There just was not much virgin forest left in the area. It seemed that one day soon, Con would be forced to make some difficult decisions about what to do with his successful business. But that day never came, because one afternoon, While working on his beloved railroad, Kahn fell beneath the wheels of one of his trains and was killed instantly. We were in shock, the boys and I. No one ever expected the big man to die. He was too hardy and full of life. Things got pretty quiet pretty quickly without Kahn around, and Ellen lost some of her spirit when she lost her man. But she kept the business running, and we kept moving logs, just like Kahn always did. Well, the years passed. Our territory got lumbered out, and most of us moved on. But I would sometimes ride up that way to visit the places I'd worked when I was young. The first summer I returned, I was walking near the abandoned location of our first railroad yard when I heard the distinct whistle of a logging locomotive. Oh, I knew that whistle. I'd heard it 1,000 times when Con Culhane blew it coming into the yard. I whipped around looking for the source of the sound, but nothing was there. The portable narrow, here's the illustration that I tried to show, and this is backwards. I don't even know this is dumb. I'm sorry, I can't figure it out. I hope you can see the train up there. The portable narrow gauge track had been moved out long ago and nothing had replaced it. I heard the whistle again and I followed the sound back into the woods, walking along the overgrown spur that had once bustled the lumberjacks, trains, and logs. The whistle blew again a third time. In that moment, I saw the woods the way they used to be, the hustle and bustle of the rail yard, and the hurly-burly behavior of the rowdy lumberjacks just coming off duty. The figures around me were shadowy, black and white like the pictures on the newfangled television set my grandson and his wife have set up in their kitchen. Aw, good, Amy. Thank you for coming. Probably the TV, sweet pea. Woo, woo, the whistle blew a fourth time. Briefly, I saw, again in black and white, Khan's first engine, his pride and joy coming toward me along narrow gauge railroad tracks that were no longer there. The train passed so close to me that I could have touched it, and Khan leaned out the window and doffed his cap, just like he used to in the old days when he saw me in the rail yard. As I waved my hand to my old friend, everything vanished just as suddenly as it had appeared. I shook my head, wondering if I had dreamed the whole thing. Then I hiked back to my car and turned for home. Just before leaving, I stopped by the house of one of the locals whom I had known since childhood. Sheepishly, I asked him if he'd ever heard the sound of a locomotive running through the woods. The old man chuckled. So you've seen Khan's train too, have you? I nodded slowly. No one around these parts talks about it much, but everyone hears the train going by now and then. When Khan's in the mood to visit his old stomping grounds, he said. Mostly we just hear the whistle blowing. I thanked him and left in a thoughtful mood, stopping just once during my journey to visit Khan Culhane's gravesite so I could to say farewell once more to my good friend. Let me just browse through here, see if I can find anything else that we haven't read. Has to be. I know I haven't read all these in here. Just sit back, relax, lay down. Do your thing. Ooh, Paul Bunyan and the Witch, Sheboygan, Michigan. Can you hear that now? That's TV. I can't wait to do that. A scary sound again sometime for Lexi. She still doesn't know that that was just a video of a wolf. That's Lexi's TV. Dave's in bed, sweet pea. But last night I played a recording of a wolf. We don't have wolves here. And she thought it was outside. So funny. She'll get a kick out of it when she realizes. When she catches on. Paul Bunyan and the Witch. It was springtime in the North Woods. The sun was warming up the world. The snowbanks were shrinking, and the birds were coming back to sing their hearts out and do some romancing. But the lumberjacks in the camp were all a little blue, in spite of the hustle and bustle in the woods around them. Paul Bunyan and Babe had left the camp on the first day of spring to scout out some new timberland for lumbering, and things were mighty dull without them. The men had to leave the trees piled on the ground until Babe could haul them out to the lake, and it took them all day long to cut a stand of trees that Paul Bunyan could have cut down in an hour. Even the cook, Sourdough Sam, missed the great lumberjack. Sam had to work night and day to keep the camp fed when Paul was home, but now he let his acre-long stove, the one that was taller than a scrub pine and could melt the snow for 20 miles around it, go out. Compared with feeding the massive lumberjack, it was a piece of cake to feed the rest of the men. Sam could whip up a meal for everyone in the whole camp using his little stove and still have time to wash dishes and write some poetry in between meals. Yes, Sam had too much time on his hands, and that's how all the trouble got started. Sourdough Sam took to wandering through the woods during his free hours, and one afternoon he floated into camp with a beatific look on his face and a sparkle in his eye. While the lumberjacks watched in shock, Sam cracked open the ice on the river and took a bath right before their very eyes. And it wasn't even June. "What's he doing that for, Johnny?" the blacksmith asked Johnny Inkslinger, who did all the accounts for Paul Bunyan and was considered a brain by the other lumberjacks. "I ain't too sure, Olaf," said Johnny, "but it looks to me like Sam might be in love." The lumberjacks snickered. Sourdough Sam in love? With whom? There wasn't any dames out here in the backwoods of Michigan. But now Sam was dressing in his best clothes and combing his beard and digging under the snow, trying to find some early blooming flowers. And he was humming a funny sort of tune, the kind the ladies all like to hear. The lumberjacks were amazed, and they nudged at Johnny Inkslinger until he went up to the cook and asked him what was that, what was what. Sam's whole face lit up, and he started talking a mile a minute and gesturing with his hands. Once he broke out into a song and dance. Then he picked up some snowdrops that he'd found beside the bunkhouse where the snow had melted and made his way out of camp. The men all clustered around Johnny Inkslinger. "What did he say?" they demanded. He's in love, all right, said Johnny. He met up with a widow woman who was setting up shop in a cottage near the river. She's a witch by trade, and she's going to make her living selling herbs and spells to everyone in the North Woods. Looks like she set a love spell on old sourdough, sniggered Olaf, and the lumberjacks all agreed. From that moment on, things were pretty grim around the lumber camp. The men had to eat cold baked beans and stale bread, 'cause all the livelong day, Sourdough Sam was over at the widow woman's house strumming on his banjo and making up love songs. The situation went on for about 2 weeks. Then suddenly, Sam appeared back in camp. The stove was fired up, and there were hot flapjacks for breakfast. "What happened to your lady friend?" Johnny asked Sourdough Sam, as the lumberjacks wolfed down bacon and pancakes. "She couldn't cook a dadgum lick," Sam said in disgust. "She invited me in for dinner, and it turns out the only thing she knows how to cook is possum stew. It was the worst thing I ever ate. I knew right then she weren't the gal for me, and I told her so to her face. She was plenty mad, let me tell you. But a man's got to do what a man's got to do." "I ain't too sure about that," said Johnny Inkslinger dubiously. "Maybe you should have let her down easy like." "Nope, better to get it over and done with right away," said Sam, and he turned back to his flapjack flopping. Johnny shook his head. It seemed to him that a gentleman should treat a lady a little better than that, especially if she was a witch. But things seemed to return to normal around the lumber camp. At least until noontime, when a whole mess of black clouds filled the sky and the wind started whipping the trees so hard. I was trying to show the baby. So hard. So hard. Where'd that go? They nearly bent double, and a whole host of eerie voices screamed from the sky, "Sourdough Sam! Sourdough Sam!" The lumberjacks came running into camp from every part of the woods, and they all huddled under the blankets in their bunkhouse as the windstorm raged for hours above them. "I think that widow woman is mad at you, Sam." "She did? How did she look different, Kevin?" "How?" I get weirded out looking in this camera. I feel like it makes my eyes go cross-eyed. Cross-eyed Betty, are you still here? Hi, Amy's Justice League. Kevin's getting a little spooked. "Oh, really? Whisper to me?" I mean, whisper to me, and then Sweet Pea had ghosts living with her for 14 years. Its arms looked backwards. Well, remember it's crawling. "Hey, Steph." Steph, gonna auction her or him. Ooh, started moving on its own. You hear it? Come on, baby. Show him. Show him you can crawl. I don't know what year it is, Steph, but it is old. You can tell by the mechanism and just the way it looks. Come on, baby. Show Steph. You hear it? No, they're not backwards, Kevin. Just because of the mechanism makes it look that way. Does it have legs for arms? No. No. Look, two arms and then two legs. It's a little crawler. It's worth a lot of money. It's worth a lot of money, Steph. And I guess they do look that way because of this camera, the way it mirrors on StreamYards. Yeah, Steph, worth a lot. I don't know if I could ever part with it. It looks crazy. No, baby, you're not crazy. You mean you don't want me to come up on your panel and see what somebody would like to pay for him? I couldn't give him up, though, Steph. Don't care how much they offered. Mm-mm. He's not going anywhere. I had him a long time. Ooh, did you hear him? Show him, baby. It is. You think he's cute, Kathy? Thank you. I don't think anybody's ever said that about him. Kathy Greenery thinks you're cute. Okay, let's see. You oughtn't to have jilted her, said Dutch Jack, the best logger in camp, when Paul Bunyan was away. And the other men agreed. Sourdough Sam didn't say anything. He just cowered beneath his blanket while dark figures swirled through the camp, shrieking his name. Hi, New England thrifter. You had a long day on camera, didn't you? With Kevin and everyone. it's, it's not scary and it's not creepy. He takes great offense to that. You know they want you. They would love to have you in their auction. You would be the piece de how would you say the piece de piece de la resistance? I can't even say it tonight. Baby. What in tarnation is going on here? Shouted Paul Bunyan. Beside him, Babe the Blue Ox bellowed so loudly he knocked over a dozen trees. The men gave a cheer and raced outside the bunkhouse in time to see Paul bundling up a bunch of gray hooded creatures and tossing them clean over the hill. Babe was swishing his tail so hard that it set up a counter wind that blew the dark clouds away. Within 5 minutes, the camp was cleared of all the phantoms, and the last rays of the sun were beaming down through the trees. Now somebody had better explain what's going on, Paul Bunyan said. He said it mildly, fingering his double-bladed axe. He looked at Johnny Inslinger, who gulped and started forward. But he was stopped by Sourdough Sam, who pushed his way to the front of the crowd. I reckon this is my fault, Sam said. Babe, the blue ox leaned down and snorted in his face, nearly knocking Sam over in search of a snack. I don't even want to finish this one. I'm sorry. I don't like this one. Too boring. And here's another one, the Loop Guru that we read about in Indiana. Well, they've got one in Michigan too, but I'm not going to read that one. Mm, this one is called Doppelganger. It's out of Lansing, Michigan. Hey, Vicky, several agree that doll don't look right. Well, I don't know. I don't think you guys know your dolls very well. If you did, you would know this was the Pistes of Resistance. And I can't even say that today. It's like it left my head. Oh, she started going, or he started rolling. See? Crawling. I never have, no. The Paul Bunyan one, Kathy? It's Paul Bunyan. He was a lumberjack, big tall guy. Chopped a lot of wood, ate great big pancakes. Hmm. How's the little grandbaby, Kathy? We've all been praying for her, for her mom and dad. Hope she gets to come home soon. Yeah, it is different. Why, you guys want me to finish? Paul Bunyan? Fine. You're back, sweet pea. Well, it's never bit any of us in the night. I've had him for a long time. He's always been very nice. Been a sweet little guy. Very sweet. Okay, let's see. Well, said Paul, when Sourdough Sam had stuttered to a close, I don't blame the lady for being a bit testy over the way you jilted her, but she may have worked out her temper by now. I hope so, said Sam fervently. Johnny just shook his head. He was the best educated of the lot, and he remembered his mamma telling him that hell had no fury like a woman scorned. And if ever there was a woman scorned, it was that witch woman of Sam's. Paul Bunyan said no more about it, and soon the camp had resumed its normal nightly routine. The late shift went on duty, and Sam whipped up a nice dinner to welcome the massive lumberjack home. But the witch woman wasn't through with Sourdough Sam, and her next curse caught up with him in the morning. When Sam tried to light his acre-long stove to make Paul Bunyan some flapjacks, the fire refused to burn. Each time Each time Sam approached the griddle, the fire went out. The men had to eat cold baked beans once again for breakfast, and it made them mighty cross. Then Sam put some bread dough up to rise, and the whole batch flopped over and melted away before his eyes. Dad blame it, he shouted, and mixed up another batch. This one floated away as fast as the first had disappeared. Around midday, there came a chorus of growls, and a whole mess of grizzly bears overran the camp, coughing out Sourdough Sam's name. All the men shimmied up into the trees as fast as they could climb and gave a shout for Paul Bunyan, who was logging nearby. Well, as soon as those bears saw the giant lumberjack, they turned tail and ran. Paul Bunyan was pretty cross by then, what with the cold breakfast and having to leave his work to rescue a few lily-livered fellows who were scared of some little grizzly bears. With a thunderous frown, he turned to go back into the woods, but stopped when he heard a terrible roaring coming from the lake. A massive shower of water came plummeting from the sky, and Babe could be heard grunting and stopping and bellowing with all his might. Paul Bunyan ran toward the lake, followed by all the lumberjacks in camp. They found Babe standing with all 4 feet planted on the bank of the lake with a gigantic sea serpent, the size of New Jersey, attached to the end of his nose. The serpent was trying to pull Babe into the lake, and Babe was trying to pull the serpent onto the land. The two massive creatures were churning up the lake so bad that it was creating tidal waves in Canada. "This is the last straw," shouted Paul Bunyan. Stalking over to the lake, he grabbed hold of the sea serpent behind its massive head and pried it off the end of Babe's nose. The serpent thrashed and struggled, but Paul just rolled it up and tied it into a knot. Then he broke off a giant pine tree at the base, hefted it onto his shoulder like a baseball bat, tossed the serpent up into the air, and batted it all the way across the country into the Pacific Ocean. The poor creature sank right to the bottom of the sea and spent a week unknotting itself. After that, it minded its own business and never went near the shore again. Once the sea serpent was gone, Paul Bunyan picked Sourdough Sam up by the collar and marched him down to the road to the widow woman's house. After tapping politely with his little finger on the door, the giant lumberjack thrust Sam in front of the startled witch and made him apologize for his rude behavior toward her. Then the massive man crouched down and spoke at length with the witch, finally drawing her map in the snow. When they finished their conversation, Paul Bunyan frog marched Sourdough Sam back to camp and made him copy the words, "I will not court witches ever again. We did miss you at the sales staff. Kept looking for you." He had to write that 1,000 times in the snow behind the bunkhouse. After Sam finished his copying, he went cautiously over to the giant stove and lit it. The fire took hold instantly, and soon the stove was good and hot, and flapjacks were sizzling on the griddle. Dinner was a merry meal with hot pancakes and bacon and biscuits dripping with butter. And he filled his plate. Johnny Inslinger said to Paul Bunyan, "What did you say to that witch to get her to lift the curse on Sourdough Sam?" Paul Bunyan chuckled. "I just told her about a man I met while I was out hunting for new timberland," he said. "His name is Herman the Hermit. He lives on the other side of Ironwood, and he's hankering for a wife. The witch woman couldn't pack her bags fast enough. Don't seem fair to poor Herman, sending him a witch who can't cook to be his wife," said Johnny. Not at all, said Paul Bunyan with a big grin. Herman don't care who he marries, as long as she can keep house, and he doesn't have any teeth, so the only thing he can eat is possum stew. Lumberjacks all laughed. Oh, that scared me. was, was that Garnet? Or just hit me on the knee.
Yeah, it was probably Mittens. She's on the chair.
She's on the, okay, it was Mittens and just hit me right in my knee. Hi, Leslie Romani. The lumberjacks all laughed and then got down to some serious eating. As for Sourdough Sam, he vowed then and there to stick to cooking and leave the courting up to the younger men, and that's just what he did. You were at another sale? Yeah, it's scheduled for a long time. But I want to start coming to you all more often.
It's because the gravy sounds pretty good right now.
Oh, yeah. It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah. I want to start cooking.
Well, we do have cans of biscuits in there. We do have the milk. We do have milk. We have flour. Sausage is frozen, though.
We can throw it in the microwave for a couple minutes.
Well, that's true. Why? Are you really wanting me to make it?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Can do it when we wake up if you want.
Okay. Hi, Almond W and Leslie.
Yo, Lexi. Hey,
Hi,
Aurora. Are you Aurora?
Oh, hush. That whispered to me. Hi, Kevin. I'm going to call him the blanket earlier.
Aw, did she? I'm going to still read. You guys can hang out. Just hang on a minute. I'm going to run to the little girl's room.
Oh, boy.
The old lady's room, I guess. More like it. I'm going to run to the old lady's room. Now tomorrow, I want you
out of can. Out of can.
I know we're gonna have to get to the store and get them more now. Tomorrow, I want you up at 6 a.m.
Yeah, okay.
And I want you to begin washing walls,
Okay.
doing the floors. right there, guys. Let's see who's left. Cross-eyed Betty, are you still here? Big Mama, are you still here? I got my Alka-Seltzer going. And I'm taking my nighttime pill. It's not Ambien. Nothing to make me go to sleep. But it is a medication I have to take at night. Minnie, it's okay, baby. Okay. I'm gonna have to leave that there. That's funny. Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't. I promise. I promise. I did not. Nope. I did not take Ambien or any sleeping medicine. It's almost done fizzing. I may take it tomorrow night. I took it the night before last, right? Since Kevin seems to know how many times I've taken it better than I do myself. Does the ambient laugh really sound different, Kevin? Just a nibble. It does seem to relax me. Okay, you talked me into it. Minnie, what are you barking about, baby? What? Minnie, baby girl. Let me check on her real quick, guys. Baby. What? What? She's just looking out the door, barking. Sometimes she does that. See, I told you I take very. Oh wait, the camera's not on. See, I'm not even gonna take this whole thing. Hey, look, that is like. That's not even. Well, that's probably a quarter of a tablet, maybe. So teeny. What is it? Hey, how small? Okay, now see, I still have that left. A little bit. Oh, a little. Just a little tiny bit. I mean, just a tiny little bit works for me. When I first took it, I took half of a pill, and it really, I slept all through the night. I didn't wake up, and I felt really refreshed. Now I just take that tiny little bit, and like I said, it makes me feel like relaxed when I was on Xanax, like we talked about the other day. It does make me, reminds me of that. Okay, let's see. What else now? Yeah, doppelganger, right? Doppelganger. Yeah, just see. I'm going, just see. She's still here, Kevin. It's been years since I thought of Granny, old Jack Bennet said to his great grandson with a cheerful grin. What a gal! What a gal! Hmm, with this little bit, no, whisper to me. No, with this tiny bit, no. I see. Hang on, Grandpa. I want to record this, Jack Bennet the Fourth said, turning on the tiny machine he held in his hands. Old Jack peered at it through his oversized glasses. Is that another one of your crazy devices? He asked suspiciously. It's a digital recorder. After I tape your story, I can plug the recorder right into the computer, download the audio file, and burn it to disk. You can listen to it yourself on a CD, Jack the Fourth said. I don't want to listen to myself on a CD, old Jack said testily. Do you or do you not want to hear this story? Jack the Fourth laughed and settled back into the chair. As I recall, Grandpa, you were the one who called and asked me to come over today with a recorder. You claimed it was urgent. That's my bookmark. Well, it is urgent, said old Jack. I've got one more story for your collection. If you don't take it down today, you won't get another chance. Nonsense, Grandpa, Jack the Fourth said. The doctor says you're fit as a fiddle and will be with us until you're 100. Old Jack shook his head, but he didn't argue with his great grandson. Instead, he told the following story. The week before I turned 8, Granny came to live with us. She was the oldest person I'd ever seen. She had white hair that was curled in ringlets all over her head. Her blue eyes were sunken in and hard to see around the wrinkles in her face. Her hands were crippled with arthritis, and the blue veins popped out of them whenever she gripped her cane. She walked with a stoop, and when she laughed, she cackled like a witch. Come give your old granny a hug, Jackie, she said when she saw me watching her from the porch. I didn't like being called Jackie. I was a tough little kid who played baseball with the other boys and raced all around, gathering toads and snakes and other useful items for scaring the girls. But I went over and hugged her anyway. Then I told her I preferred to be called Jack. She laughed her witch's cackle and gave me a lemon drop. At the time, I figured she was at least 200 years old, but my parents told me later that she was 89, which was quite an advanced age for that woman. In spite of her ancient appearance, Granny had the spirit of a young girl. She'd waltz across the kitchen with her cane, and she'd make me play baseball with her. She got quite good at batting, but I'd have to run the bases for her. Sometimes at night, she'd stand before the ornate full-length mirror in her room and shout, "Doppelganger," and then start cackling her witch's laugh. I jumped the first time I heard her shout and hurried into the bedroom. Sure something was wrong. See my doppelganger, Jackie, she said, pointing at her reflection in the mirror. What's a doppelganger? I asked, staring at her suspiciously. It's a German word, Granny said. It means double walker. It's your phantom self, your shadow that follows you everywhere. If you ever see your doppelganger outside of a reflection, it means that death is nearby. Hi, Larky. Where did I see Holly? I love showing these. I don't know why I feel like I'm really important or something. Like I'm a professor at a university. One of those things you pull down. When you highlight things. She said this quite cheerfully. Granny was never afraid of death. She looked on it as the next step in her growth as a human being. I'm going to have a new body, Jackie, she'd say. One where my back doesn't ache and my hands aren't so ugly and twisted. I'll be able to knock a baseball right over the garden fence once I've passed on. Mama didn't like it when Granny talked about death, but I didn't mind at all. The way Granny described it, death and its aftermath, sounded like a wonderful adventure. About 6 months after Granny moved into our house, I was standing in the doorway of the porch, watching the fireflies as dust settled over the trees and bushes in our yard. I was eating an ice cream cone and listening to Granny humming to herself as she rocked back and forth in a rocker by the fireplace. All at once, Granny appeared right before me, walking briskly along the porch toward the front steps. I could see her clear as day as she hobbled down the stairs, hand in hand, but from the corner of my eye, I could also see her rocking in her chair. I gasped aloud, "Doppelganger," I shouted without stopping to think. Granny's doppelganger hurried along the walkway and through the front gate. I ran after her, ice cream dripping everywhere. By the time I reached the fence, the doppelganger was gone. I stared around in the growing darkness for a moment until I realized my hand was cold and sticky with melting ice cream. Recalled to myself, I looked at the rapidly disappearing treat and walked back into the house. Oh, here's the illustration. And you can see the reflection of the doppelganger in the water. Yes, oh, yes, it is. Yes, yes. At gmail.com. Or it's the same thing. Share email to scooterchick at gmail.com or to scooterchick gmail.com. To scooterchick gmail.com. Yeah, there's no separation. I don't think. Right? With or without the spaces, I don't even know. Hold on. Let me see how it comes up. I've just always told people to scooterchick at gmail.com and I always get it. Um, it shows it, Leslie, as shows it just all as one word. Kevin found it before I did. Yeah, no space in it. Granny looked up from her chair when I entered. You're a mess, Jackie, she said. You've got ice cream all over you. Granny, I just saw your doppelganger, I said, wiping ineffectively at the ice cream on my shirt. I'm not surprised, Granny said. I've been seeing her all day. Isn't it bad luck to see someone's doppelganger? I asked, stuffing the last bit of ice cream cone in my mouth and wiping my hands on my already dirty shirt. It usually means that person's going to die, Granny said, matter-of-factly. And about time, too, she added briskly. I'm sick of this tired old body. Can't wait to get the new one. I'll be hitting the baseball right over the fence in no time, Jackie. Her words gave me an odd feeling in my chest. I'd grown to love this wrinkled old lady, and I didn't like the thought of her going away. Granny read my face like a book. Now don't you get all sad on me, Jackie. I'm happy to be joining your granddaddy in heaven, but I won't be too far away from you. Not ever, you'll see. Granny died in her sleep that night with a great big smile on her face. I was a tough little boy, but I cried like a baby at her funeral. I missed her something terrible and took no comfort in her last words to me. She seemed very far away indeed, and I wish she'd stayed in her old wrinkled body instead of putting on a new one. I was outside staring listlessly at my bat and ball while the grown-ups wept and ate at the reception my parents held at our house after the funeral. Suddenly the bat and ball rose up in the air all by themselves. Oh gosh. I'm gonna snort now. No, I just see. I'm making Minnie barf again. Oh gosh. I stared in amazement as the bat fell to the ground. There came the sound of running footsteps, and suddenly I saw a semi-transparent young girl who looked like a younger version of Granny running around the makeshift bases in the backyard. Excuse me. When we reached home plate, she threw up her arms triumphantly, did a little victory dance, gave me a huge grin, and disappeared. That was the very last time I ever saw Granny, for from that moment on, I knew in my heart as well as my head that she would never be far away from me, and she never was. Really? It didn't work? It kept you awake? You said you've gotten off of all medications for sleep, right, Kevin? Old Jack leaned back in his chair, exhausted by the telling of his story. Jack, the fourth snapped off the digital recorder, his eyes shining brightly. "Wow, Grandpa," he exclaimed. "What a great story." "Yes, old Jack," agreed with a smile. "And there is a sequel." Jack the fourth blinked. "You saw her again?" he asked. "No, I didn't see Granny again," said old Jack. "But I did see another doppelganger." "A doppelganger?" Jack the fourth asked. "Whose? When? Where?" "This morning," old Jack said. "When I came back to my room after breakfast, I looked out the bedroom window and I saw my doppelganger walk through the front door of the nursing home and out along the street." Jack the fourth gasped. "No, Grandpa, you must be mistaken." "No mistake," said old Jack. "That's why I called you." He took a deep breath and smiled at his beloved great-grandson. "I wanted you to hear one last story from your grandpa, so you wouldn't be sad when I pass on. Just like my granny told me, I'm telling you, I won't be too far from you. Not ever." Old Jack reached out and patted his great-grandson's hand. "You'll see." That's kind of cool, isn't it? Sort of, right? My ear's itching, but I'm not putting my finger in my ear. I go like this. Yeah, do you believe that, Leslie? Let me get my water. I got to get another water. I feel like I'm high all of a sudden. I don't know why. Oops, I've got to turn my camera off. I don't know why it must be hitting me fast. Or maybe just talking about it, got me feeling woozy. You know what I mean? What do they call that? I can't think of the word. You know. Hi, A.L. Skinner, 1981. And this water froze out in the garage. I have a few cans that popped like this, which really sucks because it takes the fizziness out. So it's like a waste. It takes all the bubbles away. Oh, no. Come on. Power of suggestion. You don't take it all the time. It gets in your system quick, I bet. Yeah, it does. She doesn't know why. I love you guys. Look at that now. I didn't even get that open all the way. It's just trickling. Can you see that? Gosh. I have to squeeze the can. That is pitiful. It is so funny how you knew that, though, Kevin. I didn't even say anything. Took a little piece of that Ambien, and you knew it. Didn't you? I do that because Shelly always gets a kick out of it. I know she's not here, but she always laughs. You got to get the last drop out, don't you? Hi, Aurora. I know, Leslie. We would, wouldn't we? We'd all, if we all lived by each other. I don't know what that means, but just like milk. Oh, just like milking a cow. Milking. Oh, what is that flat? And it's black cherry coffee flavor, and I love it, but it doesn't taste normal. It just tastes like regular water. Okay, I'll read one more. I'll go till 5 a.m. like yesterday. Okay. Hey, Lex, would you turn that down a little? Yeah, flat, bubbly water. I don't think I'm going to read this one. Be okay for another time. See, we read the seagull. Let's see. Okay, I guess we'll read The Rescuer. No, that might be a good one. It's like a creature. I wanted to find regular people. Okay, we read The Devil's Coach. No, this is a different one, but it's a different Devil's Coach. Nibble, just a nibble. Oh, tiny bubbles. Oh, let's see. Hold on, guys. Getting there, okay? Ooh. Sam meets death. Kalamazoo, Michigan. We hang out here too in Michigan. When I go up to Bonnie's Michigan house, when we go shopping, we go down to Kalamazoo. We backtrack. They have the best donuts down in there in that town. Forget what they call what the name of the place is. Guys would they're amazing. There's so many different kinds and they're so pretty and I gotta put that up there. Oh, those mm, I know I've taken pictures before. I'll definitely do it again. I mean, they're just so different, you guys. They're you wouldn't believe it. I can't even think what they're like right now, but they're amazing. And they had something like that up in Schaumburg Mall. Not devil donuts. I forget what they were called. But they were really cool too. Okay, Sam meets death, Kalamazoo. Sam Goodwin worked hard for a living. There's no doubt about that. He was a laborer on a local farm, and he spent every day from sunup to sundown tilling the fields and harvesting the crops, tending to the livestock, and chasing away bears and other wild critters that had an eye on the chickens and the sheep. He was so plumb tired out at the end of each day that he barely had a word for his good wife Millie, except "Hello, dear," and "Pass the stew." They do look good. You guys are making me want to know. Homer Simpson. But so, wait, I lost you. Hold on, you guys. I lost you. There you go. Now, Millie didn't mind her husband's silence since she knew he was tired from honest labor, but she was a mite annoyed by his goodnight prayers. Just before bed, Sam would fall down on his knees and pray, "Oh Lord," he would plead, "please come take me out of this troublesome world." I wouldn't like that either. Millie would frown at him from the bed. She didn't like it when he talked about dying and leaving her alone. She thought he should be happy to have a good wife and a steady job and a nice house of his very own. You should be thanking the good Lord for his blessings, not begging him to take you away, Millie would scold. But Sam was a stubborn man, and he wouldn't change his nightly prayer. After Sam went to work, Millie would often visit her neighbor Martha, and they would do laundry together, or make soap, or churn butter, or piece a quilt. One day, Millie told Martha all about Sam's nightly prayer and how much it annoyed her. Martha's husband Victor, who had who had come home for his lunch, laughed until He about split open his sides. "That's Sam," Victor said when he caught his breath. "What do you think he would do if the good Lord ever answered his prayer?" He'd head for the hills," Martha said with a grin. "He'd hide under the bed," Millie corrected. "I think we should find out which it is," Victor said, rubbing his hands with glee. The two ladies began to giggle at the thought, and the three conspirators put their heads together and made a plan to cure Sam of his desire to depart this troublesome world. When Sam got home that evening, Millie was cooking dinner and tending to their old cat Blackie, who was blind and nearly deaf. Sam scooped up his beloved pet and finished feeding the old cat her mush, which was the only food Blackie could swallow. Stroking the graying cat behind the ears, he asked Millie how her day had gone. Millie had a hard time keeping a straight face when she told him that she'd spent the day with Martha churning butter. She quickly changed the subject by inquiring about his work on the farm, and Sam told her about the day's events. At bedtime, Millie donned her nightgown and wrapper. Then she carefully opened the windows a smidge before sitting down before the mirror to braid her hair. Sam came into the room in his nightshirt, dropped to his knees beside the bed, and prayed loudly, "Oh Lord, please come take me out of this troublesome world." Millie bit her lip and stared blindly into the mirror as a sepulchral, 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 something like that. Voice from outside the window answered, "Sam, Sam." The voice moaned. Sam jumped and looked around. "What is that?" he asked abruptly. "What was what, dear?" asked Millie, hiding a smile. Victor was doing a splendid job, she thought, keeping her face blank as she turned toward her husband. "Someone called my name," Sam exclaimed. "I didn't hear anything," Millie said, rising and walking over to the bed. "You must have imagined it. Come to bed now." She climbed into the bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. "I did hear something," Sam said grumpily, but he obediently slid into bed beside her. He blew out the candle and settled down to sleep beside his wife. Sam. Sam. Victor's spooky voice wailed from outside the window. Sam sat bolt upright. "There it is again," he exclaimed into the darkness. "There is what again?" asked Millie, suppressing a smile with her hand. "Someone's calling my name." "Don't be ridiculous," Millie said. "Who would be calling your name at this hour?" From outside the window, the eerie voice wailed again. "Sam, Sam, this is Death calling to you. Answer me, Sam Goodwin." "Holy Moses, it's Death," Sam shouted. "Death is calling to me." "Death?" Millie exclaimed, but Sam hushed her. "I can't hear what Death's saying," he cried. "Sam, Sam, your soul is required at the bar of God tonight." The words rang loud and clear through the room. When he heard them, Sam started shaking so badly that the bed rattled. "Well, if Death is calling to you, you'd better answer him," Millie said briskly. But Sam was no longer beside her. "Sam!" She called, "Sam, where are you?" "I'm here," Sam's voice said from underneath the bed. Millie was startled. "Sam Goodwin, what are you doing under the bed?" she demanded. "I'm hiding from death," Sam said sheepishly, as Victor wailed his name again from outside the window. Millie could hear the floorboards creaking as Sam shifted his weight. "Do me a favor, Millie, and tell Death that I left on a trip 3 days ago, and you don't know when I'll get back." "I will do no such thing," Millie snapped. "You've been begging the good Lord to take you out of this troublesome world, and now he's answered your prayer. You come out from under that bed this instant, and you go with Death, just like you've been praying all these years." Let me get a sip here. I should have gotten my regular sink water. We do have good water, Lake Michigan water. There came a deep sigh from underneath the bed. "Did you ICU?" And a prolonged wail from outside the window. "I knew you'd say that," Sam said, crawling out from under the bed into the darkened room. "Give me a kiss then, and I'll be off." Millie gave him a kiss and walked him down to the front door. Sam was shaking so much that he could hardly walk, and Millie could barely suppress her giggles. This trick would cure him of praying for death. She was sure of it. Sam opened the front door, and a blast of frigid air swept in from outside. Millie shivered, surprised by the coldness on what should have been a balmy summer night. "Oh, ugh, Kevin." Outside on the lawn, a huge figure in a white sheet came toward them, arms lifted dramatically above its head. "Sam!" Victor wailed, flailing his arms wildly. But Sam looked beyond the ghostly form, toward the small gate and the picket fence that surrounded their yard. A look of terror crossed Sam's face. He gasped aloud and clutched his heart as the color drained from his cheeks. Confused, Millie and the sheet draped figure turned to gaze at the fence. Standing just inside the gate was a hooded form, blacker than the blackest shadow. Two white blue eyes blazed out of the cowl that covered its head, and skeletal fingers gripped a large sieve. "Oh, that's terrible, Kevin. I know some people don't have good water. We're really fortunate here." The air around the figure seemed to crackle with the energy of 1,000 bolts of lightning. Its robes whipped in an unseen wind, and its skeletal feet were half buried in swirling gray clouds that stretched back and back into eternity. Millie's heart started pounding so hard that it nearly burst from her chest. She gasped in horror and clutched Sam's shoulder as the figure slowly raised an arm and pointed a skeletal finger at them. "No," Millie shouted, "you can't have him. Come away from this troublesome world," the figure intoned in a voice like a funeral bell. From underneath the white sheet, Victor gave a terrified shriek and bolted across the lawn toward his house. "Come away from this troublesome world," Death intoned. The eldritch voice echoed and re-echoed through Millie's bones. She gripped Sam's shoulders still harder. "You can't have my son," My Sam. You can't have my Sam, Millie said. She swallowed hard. Take me instead. Yeah, at our cottage down in Buffalo, that's well water. And it's not that good of a well. Dave thinks it's good, but I'm not that thrilled with it. Fresh spring water. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's wonderful. But I do drink our tap water here. I'm telling you, it's treated, obviously, but it does come from Lake Michigan and it's wonderful. I've always loved the water here. My granny lived in the town over when I was a kid, and I loved her water. We have the same water here. And I grew up on well water, my parents' house. Sam came out of his daze when he heard her words. No, he shouted. No, Millie, I'm the one who prayed for this. I'll go. Come away from this troublesome world, Death intoned for a third time. Millie clung tightly to Sam, glaring at the glowing black figure by the gate. I won't let you go, she said to Sam. From the porch near their feet came a sudden soft meow. Sam and Millie looked down and saw form the glowing spirit form of their old cat Blackie. She was stretching, first her front legs, then her back. Finally, she gave an exciting trill and hurried down the steps toward the dark figure by the gate. The glowing form of the little cat rubbed against Death's skeletal legs and then leapt up into its arms. She meowed again and then started to purr. For a long moment, Millie and Sam stared deeply into the glowing eyes of Death. Then the dark figure by the gate vanished, and warmth flooded again into the summer night. Millie and Sam collapsed against one another, trembling and gasping for breath. Oh, Sam, was all Millie could say. Finally, Sam straightened up. Was that Victor under this sheet? He asked. Yes, Millie said, and she told him about the joke she had planned with the help of her neighbors. I just wanted to get you to stop saying that prayer, she cried. I didn't mean to attract death itself. I'm not so sure you did, Sam said, hugging her tightly. After all, I was the one who made that prayer every night. Perhaps the good Lord sent death to teach me a lesson about appreciating the fine things that he has given me in this life. Or perhaps death was already coming to our home to fetch Blackie. As he spoke, Sam led his wife gently into the house and back up the stairs to their room. Whatever the reason for Death's visit, you see before you a changed man, Sam concluded. From now on, Millie, I'm going to thank God for my blessings and pray for a long and happy life each night before I go to bed, starting right now. And Sam Goodwin dropped down on his knees and loudly gave thanks for his many, many blessings right then and there. The end. I can't imagine. I'm trying to think of what river, because I know where you live, Kevin. I'm trying to think what river when we go down that way. Um, trying to think. The White River? No, that doesn't make. Oh, you're welcome, Leslie. LMNW, you're welcome, Kevin. Whisper to me. I think you guys. Oh, okay, Ohio River. Yeah, Ohio River. Oh, Robin. Good night, Element. Thank you, Whisper to Me. Thank you guys all for coming. You don't need to thank me. I need to thank you guys for listening, or at least showing up. Whether you listen or not, I just appreciate it. I really do. See y'all later. Yeah, it was fun. Almost 3 hours. Because Carolyn will say, "What time did you get off?" I'll say 5 a.m., but it was almost 3 hours because I got to start earlier. Good night, y'all. Love y'all. See ya. Thanks again for coming. Thank you so much.